Wow, it's been so long since I made a video. It feels like it's been forever. I've been talking to a good friend of mine who just finished The Sopranos for the first time. How many years later? But hey, better late than never. And he and I have been talking a lot about the finale. So if you haven't seen all of Sopranos, go watch it and then come watch this video if you want. But this is going to be a bunch of spoilers for the last like 10 or 15 minutes of the finale last season a little bit too. So I was really enjoying my conversations with him and felt the need to make a video talking about it because I love the finale so much. I love that it is going to be a topic of conversation for so many years. It's going to be a really important part of the television culture that we have nowadays, and it's going to be just making people scratch their heads for a very long time. That's what I really love about it, though, too. I think the fact that it opens up this conversation and this dialogue for what its meaning is and what happens in the end. I think that's like one of my favorite things about it, and I think it's incredible that they pulled that off in that way, as much as it might have confused people at the time. So obviously in the last season, there's a huge war going on with Tony's crew and the crew in New York, I believe. It has been a couple years since I've seen it, by the way, so forgive me if I'm remembering some things incorrectly, but I'm pretty sure I have the gist of, there's a whole war going on. Some of Tony's guys get wiped out, a lot of the other sides, people get wiped out as well. And in the last few episodes, there's so much tension of is Tony going to get whacked? Is he going to get it? And he's going to bite the bullet just like all of his guys did, pretty much. And obviously, yeah, they're in the diner at the end. Don't Stop Believing is playing, and there are some sketchy looking people that walk in, but those are probably just your average New Jersey civilians walking into the place. They just all look sketchy up in the northeast part of the states. So there's this whole tension building up at the very end, and right when you think something's going to happen, it just cuts to black, and then that's it. You're left with that almost like a gaping hole of mystery, and it's so incredible in that way. My interpretation of it is that he just has to live with the paranoia for the rest of his life. A lot of people want to give it this definitive ending of like, no, he died, like that's what the cut to black was. David Chase saying something as simple as like, oh, I think when we die, it's just black permanently. And just because he said that, people immediately think that translates to, oh yeah, Tony's dead. My whole thing with it is the black just represents, the show coming to an end and coming to like a definitive end. I don't really look at the black as anything other than that. And this harsh cut of us just having to kind of say goodbye to the show in that way. The long bit of black is so hard to argue with the fact that could mean him dying. He has a conversation with Bobby saying, and they both think that it's black, and there's so many things that 100% like lead us to believe that he died or that he bit the bullet. That's very hard to argue with that, but the reason I try not to lean into that too much is it just seems very cliched for a show that broke all sorts of television cliches. If you really think The Sopranos would have such a generic ending as Tony getting whacked, like every fucking series finale and every other story that's ever existed, how many stories in drama and the like centuries that storytelling has been around, how many of them end with the main character dying? Almost every Shakespearean dramatic play ends that way. Almost every television finale, not every television finale, but a good handful of some of my favorite shows, the main character just dies in the end, and it's like, oh, that's the end of their story. So that gives us some good closure on that. But I feel like The Sopranos is just better than that. It wasn't a show that would fall into that same pattern. It's not a show that would just go with something so simple. It feels too simple. And obviously the fact that James Gandolfini died in real life makes me not want to believe that Tony is dead as well. In my head, Tony is still doing his thing, hanging out with the ducks in his pool, and just has to deal with looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life. That's more tragic to me. That's more haunting to me, that this mobster who goes through all these things, we see him deal with so much stress, so many headaches, so many like issues, having to kill people that he cares about, having to kill all sorts of different people and just be this ruthless character, I think it's so much more gripping that he just has to live with that, all of that, for the rest of his life. That's kind of the point of it to me. That's the point of what the show is saying, is no matter what, that choice to live that life is irreversible and in a way like a poison. It's like this poison for him that he has to live with the repercussions of his actions and just deal with being freaked out all the time and deal with his panic attacks and deal with all of it, you know? So, you know, then the reason I think that he didn't get shot is when the bell chime goes off in the diner, that's right after Meadow is parking the car. To me, it's almost like this horrible feeling of him being paranoid by his own flesh and blood walking through the door, his own daughter that he loves and adores so much. And Meadow is an amazing character. I also like AJ too. If you don't like AJ, you can fuck off, because AJ represents, he's an amazing character to represent millennials and represent people of my age group. And I fucking love Robert Eiler for his performance. I love all of the cast and every single character in this show because of their imperfections. Even Janice, like a lot of things that people hate about these characters is, in all honesty, like a huge reflection of ourselves. But not to, you know, get off topic here. We're talking about the finale. So to me, it's kind of haunting, not haunting, but it's kind of insane that he would look up in fear by his own daughter coming through the door. And the reason I think that is because the reason I think that's what happened is because it took her forever to park the car. I look at that as you know, them wanting to time that up with the bell going off and with the door of the diner opening. There's all sorts of things that happen in this entire last 10 or 15 minutes that it's like they intentionally crossed off all of these boxes in order for us to not have any definitive way of looking at it. And I think that's the most interesting part of it is there's proof and justification for any sort of way you might want to look at the ending for that show. And you can. That's entirely the point that they wanted to make with it. I think David Chase was really smart in just kind of, and you could honestly argue maybe he just couldn't come up with it. Maybe he didn't know how to end it, and he didn't want to like figure out how to end it. The show did cutoffs really well throughout the series, though, too. That to say that cutoff meant that Tony was getting killed is kind of ignoring all the other times that the show would just kind of cut to credits at the end of an episode. To me, the quick cut to black and the sharpness of that is just the unpredictable nature that is life. I don't look at the hard cut to black in any other way other than that things disrupt your outlook on life, or things just kind of interrupt us. I like the idea of it being, the black to me just represents how many times life can just interrupt what we're doing and what we're thinking. So yeah, there's all sorts of things that we could say, but to me the most interesting thing in the I don't know, I just find it way better in my head. I think it's way more interesting that he has to just deal with it. There's also the fact that I forget the character's name, but the guy, he's also in Boardwalk Empire, the actor that has the lazy eye, who I believe is on the New York side. He's in the New York gang, Johnny Sack's gang, right after Johnny Sack died. I remember him saying it's over. If I remember correctly, I remember him saying that's it, there's no more, we're done. And so many people, there was so much blood spilled on both sides that if someone did decide to kill Tony, it would just be the war would just continue. And that is what that life is. It's not like that doesn't happen. The war is never really over between gangs and mobs and all of that shit. There's no end to war in real life either. Outside of gangs, there's no end to me. Of course, war will always exist so long as humans exist. These things will always be a part of who we are and always be a part of our history until we realize that violence is just inherently a negative thing that should just never happen to anybody, and it's needless and unnecessary. So, of course, the war doesn't just end. However, in that moment, I think that they, realized that enough was enough. To me, at least. You even had Phil Leotardo in that whole thing as well, which was, very explosive sequence of events as well. There's also Tony Blundetto, I believe his name, Steve Buscemi's character. There was that whole issue with him as well. There's so much blood spilled on all these sides throughout the entire series that, I don't know, to me, I love the idea that they wipe out Tony's entire crew and then just leave him with these ashes. They leave him with this death just haunting him throughout the rest of his life. He, even in the very first season when he kills the guy in the episode College, like, that to me almost like foreshadows that, like, you never really get to leave that life. Like, that guy was in witness protection for years, and then Tony found him and he fucking strangled him to death in his own home. Like, the whole point of the show is once you're in the life and you're in that family, you never get out. And the idea of Tony suffering through that, with that, and dealing with that stress of that, I think the one thing that isn't really talked about enough in this show, or maybe it is and I just don't watch enough videos about it, is how stressful his position as the boss is. That's my favorite thing about The Sopranos, is the unnecessary and continuous stress and headaches that he deals with throughout the entire fucking thing, and all those, like, almost 10 years of however long the timeline is supposed to be. So that is the main point of the show. If that's not the main point of the finale, then I don't know what is. The genius thing about this is that we don't have to know. It doesn't matter, and the mystery of it haunts us as well, just as much as it haunts Tony. So that is, wow, it's just absolutely fascinating. Not to spoil other shows, but when other shows do, I don't want to say anything in particular, just because this is just spoilers for Sopranos finale. When shows do have a definitive, like, this character is dead, this is what happens, it's just like, that is what it is, and you can't really, there's nothing much to talk about with it. That doesn't mean that they're not good, but when you have a definitive point A to point B, or a definitive, like, period at the end of the sentence, instead of it being like this ellipses. It feels like The Sopranos with it was this ... ellipses aspect of it. And I fucking love that about it. I love that about it so much that it's like, no, like, the entire show, there's so many unresolved things. There's so many things that we don't get answers to. What happens to the Russian guy, the Russian interior designer in the Pine Barrens episode? What happens to him? They fucking knock him out. They're not sure if they kill him or not, and then they end up, Paulie and Chris end up in the middle of the fucking woods in the freezing cold. Like, we never find out what happens to that guy. There are so many things that don't get answered in the show, and that's how life is. There's so many things that don't get resolved, so many things that we don't get answers for. That to leave the finale off on a thing that's a definitive unanswered thing is, I mean, that had never been done in television before. Television was always so good at wrapping things up, and that's what we knew it to be for as long as it was. The sitcom, every single multi-camera show that was filmed in front of a live studio audience always had something wrapped up at the end, and every episode, not even just finales and series finales, but like every episode just is always like a little bow that was tied and completed. It felt complete. And the genius bit of The Sopranos, I keep saying genius because it literally is fucking masterpiece. It's a fucking masterpiece the way that they approached it and just kind of went. It feels like David Chase just went with his gut. The most amazing part of The Sopranos is it doesn't really tie that bow. It's as if the entire present has been wrapped, and right as the bow is about to be tied, it just kind of says, tie it yourself. Figure it out yourself and see what you get out of it. See what you want it to be. You don't have to tie it in a bow. You can tie it in multiple knots. You can do whatever you want with it. It's almost as if, you know, you get to come up with whatever punctuation you want at the end. Is it an exclamation point? he gets killed. That's an exclamation point. Is it just purely mysterious and the fact that it doesn't get answered? Question mark. Like you can come up with whatever specific idea you want with it. You can do whatever you like or think of it however you like, and it'll keep that conversation going for forever and ever. That'll never go away, and that is my favorite thing about it, is that he's given us this show to talk about. It's like a thick, juicy steak that is like just never ending, and it's like you never get full from it. It's just absolutely perfect in how ambiguous all of it is, and how ambiguous life is. I don't know what's going to happen to me later today. I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow or next week, next month, next year. I tell you, beginning of this year, I would have never known that where I'm at now, I never knew I'd feel this way. If you told me that I would feel this way a year ago. That's kind of the beauty of life, and that's the scary part of it, and the exciting part of it is the ambiguity of all of these things, and things never really, this permanent gray area that we are forced to live in and just kind of deal with not knowing. And we're so obsessed with knowing because the left part of our brains and our logical sides of ourselves wants things to have a definitive answer. 1 + 1 = 2. We always want things to equal something or things to mean something. And the fact that they were just like, nah, like David Chase was like, nah, fuck that. Like, we don't have to do that. I applaud you so much. I applaud you so much, David Chase. You are a fucking mastermind at creating a television show that'll just drive us crazy in the most entertaining way ever. That's what entertainment is if we're not talking about it, who gives a fuck? That's what entertainment comes down to, is if people aren't talking about it, then whatever. And you can still do that with shows that have a definitive ending, like Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad still has a ton of things that we can talk about and a lot to work with there. However, it's like we know, especially with Better Call Saul and El Camino and all these spin-offs that Vince Gilligan has created, there's like, if anything, like he's taking away that mystery of it. He's taking away that, and that's also the kind of show that Breaking Bad is. No different than Walter White, him being a very like logical, meticulous person. The show, all those shows in El Camino, like all these bits of the Breaking Bad universe, kind of parallel that way that Heisenberg was. Heisenberg was just so good at getting from point A to point B, and of course the show should work like that. Tony, on the other hand, it's like he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing the entire time. He does, but he doesn't. Like he's constantly trying to figure it out while also just wanting to enjoy his family and his life, and that's why like these guys, cheat on their wives, and why they eat whatever the fuck they want. Like they know that they can get popped any fucking day, any moment, any second of any day. So they literally live every moment like it's their last, and they don't think about it. They don't second guess it, because they know that they could just get wiped out like that. Get wiped out so quick. Sopranos is a very genius piece of work. I don't know what else I could say about it. I think that's about it. But the point of it all to me is that I don't want to say that there is no point, but the main idea behind the finale is it's like they hand you the pen. It's like they left a blank page at the end of it. They hand you the pen and they say, come up with it yourself and figure it out however you want. My personal take is the life of him living a life of just being paranoid forever and ever, no different than how we saw him throughout the entire show, is the ultimate punishment, the ultimate comeuppance, and feels more appropriate for Tony Soprano's character. Tony Soprano seems like the kind of guy where if someone came up shooting up the place, he would just run away, jump under the table. Maybe he would protect his family, maybe not. I don't know. He seems like he would try to survive at any cost. And I don't know. I'm curious if you have any. Obviously, if you completely disagree with me, I'd love to hear that. If you want to comment any of your, interpretations on it, I would love to talk about this, because this open-ended bit of television that they've given us is there's nothing like it, and I'm so grateful to live in the same timeline as this show, and I anticipate what the next significant, groundbreaking piece of television will be after this, and after everything else that we've obviously, there have been good shows since then, but what will be the next juggernaut of a show like Sopranos in the future? I have no clue. Rest in peace, James Gandolfini. I fucking love you, and I love your performance. I think you're one of the most wonderful television actors that has ever existed, and I miss you so much. You're one of many people that I would have loved to just sit down and have a conversation with. You were clearly a really wonderful person in real life too, taking care of people's debts, looking out for others, and just being a genuinely nice guy, completely opposite of Tony Soprano. I'm so sorry that you're no longer with us, but I am so grateful to have known who you were, or to know who you are, and to witness your impeccable performance on screen. Sopranos, I definitely had some stuff to say about it. Go watch it if you haven't. If you watch this and I spoiled all of that for you, it's kind of fucked. But whatever. Yeah.